The highway stretched endlessly under the dimming glow of a golden sunset. Sarah Carter had spent years on the road, navigating the country 1 mile at a time. She wasn't just any truck driver. She had once served as a military K9 handler, training some of the most elite dogs for high-risk missions. Now, her only companions were Rex and Shadow, a Belgian Malinois and a German Shepherd, both as sharp as ever. Their presence wasn't just comforting, it was a necessity. The road could be lonely, but Sarah had learned that solitude was far safer than trusting the wrong people. As she drove, the soft hum of her engine mixed with the faint sounds of country music playing through the radio. Her hands, steady on the wheel, bore the scars of a life spent fighting battles, some on the field, others in her personal life now. Her only companions were Rex and Shadow, a Belgian Malinois and a German Shepherd, both as sharp as ever. They weren't just trained animals. They were her partners, her family, the only ones who had stood by her through everything. Their presence wasn't just comforting, it was a necessity. The road could be lonely, but Sarah had learned loneliness was far safer than misplaced trust. She had met enough people who wore masks, some pretending to be allies, others openly hostile. She had seen betrayal in places she least expected it. So now, she preferred the silence. As she drove, the soft hum of her engine mixed with the faint twang of country music drifting from the radio. Johnny Cash. Classic. The melodies wove into the night, blending with the rhythmic rumble of the tires against the asphalt. Her hands, steady on the wheel, bore the scars of a life spent fighting battles, some on the battlefield, others in her personal life. A thin, jagged scar ran along her knuckles, a reminder of a mission gone sideways. Another, fainter mark on her wrist, a lesson in trust, learned the hard way. She flexed her fingers absent-mindedly, feeling the ache that never quite left. Every mile she covered was another step further from the past, yet it never truly faded. It lingered in her reflexes, in the way she checked her mirrors a little too often, in the way Rex and Shadow always seemed to sense her tension before she did. They weren't just watchdogs. They were soldiers, just like her. And no matter what came next, she knew one thing for certain. They would always be ready. She had seen enough of the world to know one thing. The real danger was never too far behind. Hours passed, and as night fell, Sarah pulled into a desolate truck stop at the edge of a small, gritty town. The neon sign flickered above, barely clinging to life, casting eerie shadows over the cracked pavement. She immediately felt it, the shift in the air, the way the few scattered locals avoided eye contact. This wasn't the kind of place where travelers were welcomed. Near the entrance, a group of bikers loitered, their jackets adorned with the emblem of the Iron Fangs. Their laughter was loud, their drunken banter crude, and their eyes immediately locked onto Sarah the moment she stepped out of her truck. To them, she was an outsider, and worse, an easy target. Sarah focused on her task, filling up her truck, her sharp instincts on high alert. She had been in worse situations before, and she wasn't about to let a few wannabe tough guys get under her skin. But Troy, the self-proclaimed leader of the Iron Fangs, wasn't one to let an opportunity for amusement slip by. Near the entrance, a group of bikers loitered, their leather jackets adorned with the emblem of the Iron Fangs, a snarling wolf, its fangs bared in challenge. Their presence dominated the truck stop, their boots scuffing against the pavement as they leaned against their motorcycles, talking loudly, laughing even louder. The air smelled of cheap beer, gasoline, and trouble. Their banter was crude, their voices slurred from one too many drinks, but the moment Sarah stepped out of her truck, the mood shifted. Their laughter didn't stop, but it changed, lower, more deliberate. Eyes filled with amusement, curiosity, and something uglier locked onto her as she moved. To them, she was an outsider, and worse, an easy target. Sarah ignored them. She had dealt with men like this before, loud, posturing, thinking their numbers made them invincible. She focused on her task, gripping the fuel pump with steady hands, filling up her rig as if she hadn't noticed them. But she had. Every muscle in her body remained tense but controlled, her instincts sharp as ever. Rex and Shadow, still inside the truck, sensed it too. Shadow's ears perked up, his sharp eyes locked on the bikers. Rex let out a low, quiet growl, a warning. Sarah had been in worse situations, and she wasn't about to let a few wannabe tough guys get under her skin. But Troy, the self-proclaimed leader of the Iron Fangs, had no intention of letting her go unnoticed. He pushed off from his bike, cracking his knuckles, a predatory grin spreading across his face. To him, this was sport, and he had just found his next game. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered, stepping forward with a lazy smirk. "A woman in a man's job. You lost, sweetheart." Sarah didn't flinch, didn't even look his way. "Not interested," she said simply, focusing on the pump. But ignoring him only fueled his arrogance. "Come on now, don't be like that. Maybe you need a real man to take the wheel for you," Troy continued, his buddies chuckling behind him. Rex and Shadow, usually silent, emitted low, warning growls, a sound that sent a clear message. The laughter stilled, and for the first time, Troy actually looked at the dogs. Sarah finally turned her gaze to him, her eyes cold, calculating. "Touch my truck, and you'll see just how much training these boys have," she said, her voice calm but laced with unmistakable danger. For a brief second, uncertainty flickered in Troy's gaze. But arrogance had a way of blinding fools to real threats. As Sarah walked inside to pay, the gas station attendant, Mac, watched her with quiet concern. He was an older man, weathered by years of seeing too many fights break out in this town. "You best be careful, miss," he murmured as she handed him cash. "Those guys, they don't take kindly to outsiders, especially strong-willed ones." Sarah didn't scare easily. She met his gaze and gave a small nod of appreciation. "I've handled worse." Mac sighed, shaking his head. "Just don't give em a reason." Sarah didn't need to. The Iron Fangs had already made up their minds. As she stepped back outside, she could feel their eyes still on her. The air was thick with anticipation, as if they were just waiting for the right moment to strike. Before climbing into her truck, she paused and looked directly at Troy. "Respect is earned, not taken." The bikers laughed, but Troy felt something in her gaze that unsettled him, a feeling he couldn't shake, a warning he chose to ignore. Inside the Rusty Nail, a dive bar reeking of cheap beer and cigarette smoke, Troy slammed his glass down on the counter. "You see the look in her eyes. She thinks she's better than us." His voice was low but laced with venom. His second in command, Derek, A burly man with a scar running down his cheek smirked. Maybe she needs a little lesson in humility. A few other Iron Fangs chuckled, already liking where this was going. Troy leaned back, taking a slow sip of whiskey before speaking again. She thinks she can roll through our town like she owns the place. Nah, she's gonna learn real quick that this ain't her playground. What's the plan? Derek asked. Troy's smirk widened. We tail her. Have some fun. See how tough she really is. The men grinned, excitement buzzing in the air. They had no idea the kind of storm they were about to provoke. Sarah was back on the highway, the hum of her truck a familiar comfort. Troy leaned back in his chair, the worn-out wood creaking beneath his weight. The dim, flickering light of the rusty nail cast long shadows across the bar, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the stale scent of spilled beer. He swirled the whiskey in his glass before taking another slow sip, his sharp eyes glinting with something sinister. She thinks she can roll through our town like she owns the place, he said, voice low and dripping with amusement. Nah, she's gonna learn real quick that this ain't her playground. Derek, his second in command, leaned forward, resting his forearms on the bar. His knuckles were scarred from years of fights, and the gleam in his eyes showed he was already on board. What's the plan? He asked, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Troy set his glass down with a dull clink, stretching his arms as if already savoring the entertainment ahead. We tail her. His grin widened, revealing teeth yellowed from years of whiskey and bad decisions. Have some fun. See how tough she really is. The men around him chuckled, exchanging eager glances. Excitement buzzed in the air, the anticipation of an easy hunt fueling their bravado. None of them had any idea what kind of storm they were about to provoke. The steady hum of her truck's engine filled the cab, a familiar comfort. The neon lights of the truck's stop faded into the distance in her side mirror, replaced by the endless stretch of asphalt ahead. Inside the cab, Rex and Shadow lay at ease, but not asleep. Their ears twitched at the sound of the road, their sharp eyes scanning the darkness as if sensing the storm that loomed behind them. Sarah exhaled slowly, her grip firm on the wheel. Something felt off. She had spent years trusting her instincts, and right now, every fiber of her being told her she wasn't alone out here, and she was never wrong about things like that. But something was off. 2 motorcycles. She had noticed them in her side mirror for the past 10 miles. Rex and Shadow were alert, their ears twitching, picking up on her unease. Sarah's fingers tapped against the wheel as she thought. Coincidence? Maybe. But she doubted it. She tested them, switching lanes, slowing down, speeding up. They matched her every move. No coincidence. Sarah's grip tightened. If they wanted trouble, they'd get it. The bikers weren't just following anymore. They were playing games. One pulled up beside her, knocking on her truck door with a grin that reeked of arrogance. Another swerved in front of her, forcing her to hit the brakes hard. A third biker rode dangerously close, his intent clear, trying to force her off the road. Sarah's heart pounded, but not with fear, with calculation. She'd dealt with worse. She'd been trained for worse. Her mind worked quickly, assessing routes, potential counterattacks, their weaknesses. They thought they were in control. They were wrong. Up ahead, something caught her eye, a roadblock. 3 more Iron Fangs members waited on the side of the road near an abandoned warehouse, their bikes parked in a messy row. It was a trap. Sarah exhaled slowly. All right. Let's see how far they want to take this. With no choice, she pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath her tires as she came to a stop in the desolate area. The bikers surrounded her truck, laughing, revving their engines, their eyes glinting with predatory amusement. Rex and Shadow watched from the truck's interior, their growls barely audible, but full of promise. Sarah didn't move, didn't react. She was waiting for them to make their final mistake. Troy stepped forward, his boots crunching against the dirt. He leaned casually against her truck, tapping on the metal. "Told you, sweetheart," he drawled. "This is a man's world. Now get out, and maybe we'll be nice." Sarah opened the door and stepped out. Not scared, not hesitant, just calculating. Shadow and Rex stayed inside, watching, waiting, ready. Troy grinned, mistaking her composure for submission. Big mistake. He reached out, grabbing her arm. Sarah's lips barely moved as she muttered 2 words. Big mistake. Troy's grip tightens on Sarah's arm, his smirk widening as if he had already won. But in a flash, everything changes. Sarah twists her arm free with a quick, practiced motion, using his own force against him. Before he can react, she grabs his wrist, pivots her body, and slams him onto the ground with a brutal military takedown. The impact is hard, knocking the wind out of him. The bikers freeze. This wasn't supposed to happen. Derek, the biggest of the group, lunges at her. Big mistake. Sarah ducks under his swing, using his momentum to send him crashing into another biker. 2 down. 5 left. The others hesitate, the cocky grins fading from their faces. Sarah straightens, her stance firm, her breathing calm. "Still think I need a man to take the wheel?" One of the bikers pulls out a steel chain, swinging it threateningly. Sarah doesn't flinch. Instead, she lets out a sharp whistle. The truck door swings open. Rex and Shadow launch into action. Rex, a Belgian Malinois, trained for military takedowns, charges straight for Troy, knocking him flat on his back, teeth bared, snarling inches from his throat. Troy doesn't dare move. Shadow, the massive German shepherd, goes for Derek, pinning him down in seconds. A low, dangerous growl rumbling from his chest. The remaining bikers stumble backward, suddenly realizing they are completely outmatched. Derek barely had time to process what had happened before a flash of fur and muscle lunged toward him. Shadow moved like a bullet. The massive German shepherd hit Derek with full force, knocking the wind out of him before he could scramble to his feet. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the dog's chest, vibrating through Derek's bones as he lay pinned beneath nearly 80 pounds of trained muscle and instinct. Derek froze. Shadow's powerful front paws pressed against his chest, teeth bared just inches from his throat. One wrong move, one twitch. That was all it would take. Derek's breath came in short, shallow gasps. His bravado from earlier now completely gone. The remaining bikers stumbled backward, their cocky smirks replaced with wide, terrified eyes. This wasn't a bar fight. This wasn't some easy target they could intimidate for fun. They were completely outmatched. Rex, the sleek Belgian Malinois, circled behind Sarah, his amber eyes locked onto Troy. His ears pricked forward. His entire body coiled like a spring, ready to strike at a single command. Troy sat up, still dazed from being slammed to the ground, but the moment his eyes met Rex's, he knew, one wrong move, and this dog would tear him apart. Sarah didn't have to say a word. Her stance, her dogs, the way she had already dismantled their so-called leader, it was enough. The bikers were used to being the predators. Tonight, they had become the prey. The cocky arrogance is gone. Now, there's only fear. One biker gathers his courage and rushes Sarah. Bad choice. She sidesteps, slamming an elbow into his ribs, then twisting his arm behind his back. He yells in pain before she sweeps his legs out from under him. Another tries to grab her from behind. Even worse choice. Sarah shifts her weight and flips him clean over her shoulder, sending him sprawling onto the dirt. Now there are only 3 left standing. One of them, a wiry guy with a nervous expression, pulls a knife. Shadow notices instantly. His growl is bone-chilling. Sarah's voice cuts through the night like steel. Drop it. Now. He hesitates. Shadow takes a slow step forward, bearing his deadly fangs. The biker's hands shake. Then, the knife clatters to the ground. Smart move. Troy, humiliated and furious, pushes himself off the ground. Blood drips from a cut on his forehead. His pride is shattered. He roars in frustration and lunges at Sarah one last time. She's ready. She sidesteps, twisting into a precision counterattack she learned in the military. Her knee connects with his stomach. Her elbow slams into his back. Troy collapses to the dirt, groaning in pain. Sarah steps over him, looking down, her expression unreadable. Still think this is a man's world? Troy doesn't answer. He can't. The fight is over. The once mighty Iron Fangs are now nothing more than a battered, broken mess. Troy still lies on the ground, struggling to catch his breath. His men aren't much better, bruised, humiliated, and completely defeated. Derek wipes a streak of blood from his mouth, his hands shaking. Let's get out of here, he mutters. No one argues. One by one, they stagger toward their bikes, their cocky arrogance now replaced with quiet shame. Troy looks up at Sarah, his eyes full of hate, but also something else. Fear. Sarah doesn't gloat. She doesn't need to. The tables have completely turned. A slow clap echoes from the distance. Mac, the gas station attendant, steps out of the shadows, phone in hand. He caught everything on video. Every punch. Every takedown. Every moment the Iron Fangs lost control. He smirks, waving his phone. I think the sheriff would love to see this. The bikers freeze. If this gets out, they won't just be humiliated. Their entire reputation, the fear they rely on, will be destroyed. Derek snarls. You wouldn't dare. Mac shrugs. Try me. A long, tense silence hangs in the air. Then, Troy slowly shakes his head. Let's go. He knows it's over. As the bikers turn to leave, Sarah crouches beside Troy. Her voice is low, calm, dangerous. Next time you pick a fight, make sure you know who you're messing with. Troy clenches his jaw, but says nothing. Rex and Shadow sit obediently beside her, their sharp eyes locked onto him. They don't growl. They don't move. They don't have to. Their silent presence says everything. Troy swallows hard, his fingers digging into the dirt beneath him. He won't forget this. Ever. Sarah straightens, dusting off her hands. She doesn't look back as she walks toward her truck. The Iron Fangs don't dare stop her. The only sound is the low rumble of her truck's engine as she climbs inside. She adjusts her mirrors, taking one last glance. The bikers stand there, motionless, watching her go, still in shock, still trying to process what just happened. Then she's gone, driving off into the night, her two loyal K9s beside her. The road stretches ahead, open and endless. And Sarah Carter? She's just getting started. By morning, the video has exploded online. Mac, ever the opportunist, had uploaded it overnight, and now it's everywhere. A lone woman and her military K9s taking down a gang of bikers? People can't get enough. The Iron Fangs' reputation is in ruins. Troy and his gang had spent years building their image. Untouchable, feared. Now, they're nothing but a punchline. Sarah watches the news update on her phone, shaking her head with a slight smile. She didn't do it for the fame. She didn't do it for the attention. She did it because she refused to back down, because the world still needed people willing to stand their ground. She glances at her rearview mirror, the open road stretching behind her, the endless highway ahead. Rex and Shadow rest beside her, their ears twitching at every sound, ever vigilant. They weren't just pets. They were partners. Sarah exhales, gripping the wheel. The night was over, but she knew one thing for certain. Some battles never end, and she'd be ready when the next one came. With her loyal protectors beside her, she drives into the horizon, always moving forward.